You need to understand your position in this organization. Marvin. Gordon Fletcher didn't even look up when he said it. His fingers were busy straightening papers on his desk, making sure every edge lined up perfect. We were sitting in conference room 2B at Industrial Systems Corporation, the one with the broken air conditioning and that persistent smell of burnt coffee that never quite went away. I'm Marvin Hayes, 47 years old, and I've been keeping this company's factory automation systems running for 22 years. That morning, I thought I was just going to another routine compensation review. Turns out I was about to learn exactly what 22 years of loyalty was worth to them. Gordon slid a paper across the table. His watch caught the fluorescent light. Expensive, probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. This outlines your updated compensation structure for the upcoming fiscal year, he said in that flat HR voice. They all perfect after years of delivering bad news. I looked down at the document. Senior Automation Systems Engineer, 22-year service record, merit increased 2.9%. Below that, in smaller print, like they hoped I wouldn't notice, compensation aligned with organizational equity standards. I'd seen that phrase before. It was corporate speak for we've decided what you're worth and arguing won't change our minds. 2.9%, I said quietly. Correct. That falls within the standard range for senior technical staff. I leaned back in that uncomfortable chair. The Army taught me patience, how to stay calm under pressure. 6 years with the Corps of Engineers gave me that discipline. But this wasn't equipment failure or emergency troubleshooting. This was something different, something that felt like getting sucker punched. What about Wesley? Gordon's pen stopped moving for just a second. Then he forced a smile that looked like it hurt. I'm not sure what you're asking. Wesley Brooks, the new Operations Excellence Director. He started 10 months ago. The smile got tighter. I can't discuss another employee's compensation with you, Marvin. You know that. He's making almost double my salary, isn't he? Gordon set his pen down carefully, buying time. Wesley brings different qualifications to the organization. He has an MBA from a prestigious business school. He has strategic vision that aligns with executive objectives. I let those words hang there for a moment. Different qualifications. In the Army, qualifications meant you could operate heavy machinery when levs depended on it. You either knew how to troubleshoot hydraulic systems under fire, or you didn't. You could repair communication equipment during combat, or you couldn't. There wasn't any MBA that taught you how to keep a factory running when critical systems started failing, and I have 22 years of building every automation system this company runs. I said evenly. I've personally prevented at least 30 major production failures that could have shut us down for weeks. I've saved this company millions in avoided downtime and equipment replacement, but Wesley has an MBA, so that's worth twice as much. Different roles command different market rates, Gordon said, his voice getting that careful HR neutrality. Leadership positions are benchmarked differently than technical positions. So technical expertise is worth half of what a business degree is worth, even when that technical expertise is literally keeping the production lines operational. Marvin, I understand you're frustrated. I'm not frustrated, I interrupted. I'm clarifying. Because it sounds like you're telling me that someone with zero understanding of our manufacturing systems, zero experience with our legacy equipment, and zero contribution to actually making anything is worth twice what I am. I just want to make sure I'm hearing that correctly. Gordon folded his hands on the table. Professional, controlled, unmoved by logic or fairness. We benchmark compensation against external market data. Leadership roles command premium salaries. Credentials matter. Translation, know your place. I thought about my kids, Rachel and Stephen, both still in school. Rachel was a sophomore at State University. Tuition $31,000 this year. Stephen was a high school senior, planning for college applications. I thought about the child support payments to my ex-wife, Carol Miller, $1,800 every month like clockwork. I thought about the health insurance premiums that kept going up, the 401k that had taken a beating in the last market downturn, the fact that I was 47 years old and supposedly in my peak earning years. Then I reached into my bag. Gordon tensed slightly, probably thinking I was pulling out a legal document or a list of grievances. Instead, I took out a single piece of paper, folded once, and placed it on top of his compensation document, my resignation letter. His eyes dropped to it. I watched the blood drain from his face as he read the first line. Effective immediately, I resigned from my position as Senior Automation Systems Engineer at Industrial Systems Corporation. Marvin, he started, voice cracking. I sent a copy to your inbox at 9:04 a.m., I said calmly. You'll see it when you check your email, along with copies to my direct manager, the plant manager, and the VP of operations. He blinked at the signature, at the date, at words that couldn't be taken back or negotiated away. You don't need to make this decision right now. This is a significant step. Talk to your manager. Sleep on it. We can revisit the numbers. I've been sleeping on it for 22 years, I said, standing up. This is me waking up. Gordon opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. But you told me to understand my position in this organization, I said, picking up my bag. So I do. And my position is somewhere else. I left the resignation letter on the table and walked out. The click of the conference room door closing behind me was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in years. Let me back up and tell you how a quiet, underpaid automation engineer and one dismissive sentence in an HR meeting turned into the most expensive 36 minutes in Industrial Systems Corporation history. My name is Marvin Hayes. I'm 47 years old, divorced father of 2 kids who are counting on me for their future. I don't have an MBA. I don't have an Ivy League degree. What I have is an engineering degree from a state university. 6 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, working on construction equipment and power systems, and 22 years of institutional knowledge about manufacturing automation so complex that it required constant attention just to keep it running. The Army shaped how I approach everything. When you're responsible for keeping generators operational in forward operating bases, you learn that people's safety depends on systems working exactly as designed. You don't get to blame someone else when power fails during operations. You don't get to make excuses when hydraulic systems break down in the middle of a mission. You fix it, document what went wrong, and make sure it doesn't happen again. That discipline served me well when I started at Industrial Systems Corporation in 2002, right after I finished my degree on the GI Bill. Back then, they were a mid-size manufacturing company trying to compete with automated facilities 10 times their size. On paper, they provided precision manufacturing for aerospace and defense contractors. In reality, they ran a collection of production systems held together with outdated programming, manual workarounds, and the desperate prayers of 2 exhausted technicians. The company had contracts with major aerospace firms, defense contractors, and automotive manufacturers. Their production lines made critical components for aircraft engines, missile guidance systems, and precision automotive parts. When those systems went down, real people lost their jobs. Contracts got canceled. Delivery schedules collapsed. My interview was with Harold Gibson, the plant manager at the time, who'd built his career on actual manufacturing work before getting promoted into management. He understood that automation wasn't just about installing software and hoping for the best. Can you keep this equipment from falling apart? He asked, gesturing at a printout of our production schedules that looked more like a disaster timeline than a manufacturing plan. Depends, I said. Can I actually fix things, or will I just be putting out fires? If you can justify the changes, he said, you can make them. He hired me that afternoon. For the first month, I just observed. I sat in on equipment failure calls, read maintenance reports, traced control system logic, talked to the operators who'd been there long enough to know where all the problems were buried. The pattern was clear: reactive maintenance, no predictive monitoring, and documentation that was either missing or dangerously outdated. The second month, I started documenting failure patterns, not theoretical problems, but real failures that had actually happened. Every time something broke, I wrote it down. What failed, why it failed, what the warning signs were, whether the repair actually fixed the root cause or just delayed the next breakdown. By the third month, I'd identified 18 critical vulnerabilities in our automation systems. I documented them, quantified the risk, estimated the cost to fix versus the cost of catastrophic failure. When I presented it to Harold, he asked the only question that mattered: how much to fix all of this? 14 months of dedicated work, I said, and the authority to shut down production when safety requires it. You have both, he said. I rebuilt the monitoring systems first, because you can't prevent failures you can't see coming. Created dashboards that showed not just whether equipment was running, but how close it was to breakdown. Vibration patterns, temperature trends, pressure variations, all the early warning signs that let you schedule maintenance instead of just responding to disasters. Then I rebuilt the control logic properly. Real redundancy, automated safeguards, comprehensive error logging. By the end of year 1, we had actual visibility into our production systems. By year 2, I'd trained 3 junior technicians on proper troubleshooting procedures. By year 3, I was the person everyone called when things went sideways. Not because I was officially on call, but because I was the only one who'd seen these specific failure modes before. I became the institutional memory nobody wanted to admit they depended on. And for a while, that was fine. The company grew. We added more contracts, more complexity. Revenue increased from $67 million to $18.5 million over my tenure. The board was happy. Executives got their bonuses. I got a 3.2% raise and a coffee mug that said Essential Employee. I didn't complain, not because I didn't care, but because I believed that eventually competence would be recognized. That good work would be rewarded. That loyalty would be returned. That was my first mistake. The shift started 3 years ago when Industrial Systems decided it needed to modernize its operational excellence framework. That was the phrase used by the new CEO, Philip Romano, former consulting executive brought in by the board to scale operational efficiency. Philip loved words like optimize and streamline and leverage synergies. He did not love words like equipment lifecycle or preventive maintenance, or that's going to break if we don't address it properly. Within 6 months of Philip taking over, the company started hiring differently. Less emphasis on people who understood how things worked. More emphasis on people who could make things sound impressive in board meetings. We got managers with MBAs who'd never operated a CNC machine. We got directors who could talk about driving operational excellence, but couldn't explain what a PLC actually controlled. We got consultants billing $650 an hour to tell us we should implement lean manufacturing principles. And we got Wesley Brooks, MBA from a top-tier business school, 8 years at a strategy consulting firm, 0 manufacturing background. His title, Operations Excellence Director. His job, align production initiatives with business objectives and drive strategic optimization of legacy processes. Translation, make everything sound good in PowerPoint presentations while people like me did the actual work. I discovered the pay disparity by accident, and it hit me like a physical blow. I was looking for a technical manual Laura Peterson had promised to upload when I clicked the wrong file. Wesley Brooks' offer letter. Base salary $158,000. Signing bonus $30,000. Annual bonus target 25%. Stock options 18,000 shares. I stared at those numbers for a long time. Then I opened my most recent pay stub. Base salary 81,200 tones. No signing bonus, annual bonus target 4%, which I'd received exactly twice in 22 years. Stock options 2,000 shares from my original offer. Nothing since. 10 months at the company, 0 manufacturing knowledge, 0 systems saved from catastrophic failure, making 95% more than I was. The math was simple, and it was devastating. I closed both files and sat there in my cubicle for a very long time, staring at the production monitoring screens that suddenly seemed meaningless. The factory hummed around me, machines running, operators working, people doing jobs that suddenly felt pointless. That evening, I went home to my empty apartment and did something I hadn't done in 8 years. I updated my resume, really updated it. Not just the annual courtesy refresh for HR files. I documented every major system I'd built, every crisis I'd prevented, every innovation I'd implemented that saved the company money or reduced downtime. The list was longer than I expected. The hydraulic system redesign that prevented the catastrophic press failure in 2018. The control logic overhaul that stopped the contamination incident in 2020. The predictive maintenance program that reduced unplanned downtime by 74% while catching 89% more potential failures before they happened. I sent my resume to 4 recruiters I'd been ignoring for years. Within 48 hours, my phone was ringing. Within 2 weeks, I had 5 serious offers. Within 3 weeks, I'd accepted one. Senior Manufacturing Systems Engineer at Advanced Manufacturing Solutions. $134,000 base salary, 18% bonus target, real stock options. All I needed was the right moment to leave Industrial Systems. Gordon gave it to me. By 9:12 a.m., my security badge had been flagged for deactivation. By 9:18 a.m., my system access was being revoked across 23 production environments. By 9:23 a.m., I'd cleared my desk, boxed up my tools and that coffee mug that said essential employee, and walked past 6 colleagues who suddenly became very interested in their computer screens. By 9:31 a.m., the first critical alarm started screaming. Here's what most people don't understand about complex manufacturing automation. It's not like a car where you can pop the hood and see what's broken. It's more like a human nervous system. Interconnected processes that depend on each other in ways that aren't always obvious. When something goes wrong, the symptoms can show up anywhere. And finding the root cause requires knowing how all the pieces fit together. I'd been that institutional memory for 22 years. Every weird programming choice, every undocumented modification, every workaround that had become critical infrastructure. It was all in my head, backed up by handwritten notes I kept in a locked drawer. The drawer they didn't know existed. By 9:38 a.m., every technician in the building was in emergency mode. The primary production control system was throwing cascading errors, not complete failure. That would have been obvious. Instead, it was degrading slowly, missing critical timing sequences while generating false error codes at an exponential rate. Danny Walsh, the junior technician I'd been mentoring, was on duty. Poor kid was 24 years old with 16 months of experience, suddenly responsible for systems he'd only seen from the outside. He checked the standard operating procedures I'd written 4 years ago, but the procedures covered normal failure modes. This wasn't normal. What was happening was a memory overflow in the sequence control processor triggered by a specific combination of production load and environmental conditions. I'd seen it exactly once before, 11 months earlier during a particularly hot summer day when the cooling systems were struggling. I documented the solution in my personal notes along with the monitoring parameters needed to detect it early. The notes that were now sitting in the trunk of my truck. Danny escalated to Laura Peterson, our senior production technician. Laura was smart, dedicated with 9 years of experience, but she'd never seen this particular failure mode because I'd fixed it quietly the last time, added some monitoring to catch it early, and moved on to the next crisis. Laura did everything right. She opened diagnostic panels, examined error logs, looked for patterns. She could see the symptoms, cycle times increasing, quality parameters drifting, error rates climbing, but she couldn't see the cause. At 10:15 a.m., Wesley Brooks walked into the production control room. In my mind, I could picture him perfectly. Pressed khakis, button-down shirt, that slight smile that said he was about to solve everything with process optimization. "Why are the efficiency numbers red?" he asked. "We're investigating a control system issue," Laura replied, not looking up from her screens. "Investigating doesn't help our delivery schedules." "Can't you just restart the line?" I can only imagine the look Laura gave him. In manufacturing, just restart is like a surgeon saying just cut it out without knowing what they're cutting. You can make things much worse very quickly. "We need to identify the root cause first," Laura said. "If we restart without understanding the problem, we could damage equipment or lose critical production data." "How long will that take?" "I don't know. This isn't a standard failure mode." Wesley pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Philip." Philip Romano arrived 12 minutes later. I knew him well enough to picture his reaction, the carefully controlled expression that meant he was calculating financial damage. The way he'd scan the room to identify who he could blame if this became a board-level problem. "Where's Marvin?" he asked, the question I'd been waiting for. "He resigned this morning," Wesley said, over a compensation dispute. I would have paid money to see Philip's face in that moment. "You let him walk today?" "I didn't let him do anything," Wesley said defensively. "He made an emotional decision." Philip left immediately. I know because at exactly 9:47 a.m. minus 36 minutes after I'd placed that resignation letter on Gordon's desk, Philip Romano was standing outside my apartment building, knocking on my door like someone whose entire world was falling apart. Which, technically it was. "Marvin," he said, not bothering with pleasantries when I opened the door. "We need you back immediately." I looked at him through the gap in my doorway. His normally perfect suit was wrinkled, tie loosened, hair disheveled. This was a man who prided himself on control, on having backup plans for backup plans. Seeing him rattled was almost worth 22 years of being undervalued. Almost. "I don't work there anymore," I said. "I know, but our primary production lines are completely down. We have $400,000 worth of aerospace components that need to ship by Friday. Nobody can figure out why the system is failing. That sounds like your problem, not mine." His jaw clenched. "Marvin, please, just for today. We'll pay you, consulting rate, whatever you want." I shook my head slowly. No, why not? Because 36 minutes ago, your company made it very clear what I'm worth to them. So now you get to learn what your production systems are worth without me. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Philip knocked 4 more times, each series more desperate than the last. Then I heard his footsteps retreating down the hallway, probably back to his car, back to a crisis that was getting worse by the minute. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down to fill out onboarding paperwork for Advanced Manufacturing Solutions. The outage lasted 84 hours. I didn't watch it happen in real time, but I heard about it later from Laura Peterson, who was still willing to talk to me after everything settled. By 2 p.m., 3 major delivery schedules were at risk. By 4 p.m., Philip had called in Manufacturing Crisis Solutions, an emergency consulting firm that specialized in production recovery. The lead consultant spent 6 hours examining our systems and finally admitted what everyone already knew. Without the original systems engineer, this could take days or weeks to fully understand and stabilize. The consulting firm worked through the weekend. They brought in 8 specialists, set up a command center, and started systematically going through every piece of our automation infrastructure. At $550 per hour per consultant, the bill was climbing toward $185,000 before they'd even identified the problem. The breakthrough came at 2:30 a.m. Sunday when Danny Walsh finally remembered something I'd mentioned casually 8 months earlier. There was an old technical document buried in our internal knowledge base, something I'd written after a similar incident years ago. Critical system dependencies and recovery procedures. It had everything. The memory overflow issue, the specific diagnostic queries, the exact sequence of steps needed to recover without triggering secondary failures. Danny followed my documentation step by step. It worked. Systems stabilized, production resumed. The consultants packed up and sent a bill for $185,000. The crisis was over, but the damage was done. The aftermath unfolded over the next 6 months, and I watched it from the comfortable distance of my new job at Advanced Manufacturing Solutions. Within the first week, 2 major aerospace contracts worth a combined $3.8 million were terminated. The delivery failures had triggered penalty clauses that cost Industrial Systems another $1.2 million. Philip called an emergency board meeting. 3 executives were asked to pursue other opportunities. Wesley Brooks was quietly reassigned to a strategic planning role with no operational authority. Gordon Fletcher was terminated for what they called organizational restructuring, though everyone knew it was because he'd managed to lose the most valuable employee in the company over a $25,000 salary difference. David Mitchell reached out to me 3 weeks after the incident. Professional email, carefully worded. He offered $128,000 base salary, 15% annual bonus, title bump to principal manufacturing engineer, direct reporting to him instead of through middle management. "I know we failed you," the email said. "I'm asking for a chance to make it right." I read it 3 times, then I responded, "I appreciate the offer, but I've already started at my new company. I'm happy here. I hope you can rebuild your engineering program successfully, because I was happy." Advanced Manufacturing Solutions was everything Industrial Systems wasn't. The CTO, Dr. Rebecca Davis, had spent 12 years doing actual engineering work before moving into leadership. She understood that manufacturing automation wasn't a business problem you could solve with strategy meetings and PowerPoint presentations. "What's the worst crisis you ever responded to?" she asked during my final interview. I told her about the hydraulic system failure we'd prevented in 2018, how I'd tracked a pressure anomaly through 4 different production lines and identified the root cause before it could trigger a catastrophic equipment failure. She nodded slowly. "If you join us, that kind of knowledge won't sit in someone's head or personal notes. It'll be documented, shared, and built into our processes. We've learned that talented people leave. When they do, we need to make sure the organization retains what they knew. Starting salary, $124,000. Bonus target, 18%. Stock options, 12,000 shares. But more than the money, it was respect. On my first day, Rebecca introduced me to the engineering team. This is Marvin Hayes. He's joining us as Senior Manufacturing Systems Engineer. He has more real-world automation experience than most of us combined. When he tells you something about production systems, listen, because he's earned that authority through 22 years of keeping critical manufacturing running. No qualifiers, no he's just a technical person, just respect. Within 6 months, I'd rebuilt their monitoring infrastructure using everything I'd learned at Industrial Systems, but properly documented this time. Within a year, I'd trained 4 other engineers to the point where they could handle major incidents independently. Not because I was trying to make myself replaceable, but because I was building something sustainable. Today, I'm Principal Manufacturing Engineer at Advanced Manufacturing Solutions. I make $147,000 base salary. My bonus last year was $26,000. When we go public next year, my stock options will set me up for a very comfortable retirement. But more than the money, I have something industrial systems never gave me: respect. When I say something's going to fail, people listen. When I document a procedure, it becomes required reading. When I suggest we need to slow down and do something right, nobody tells me to understand my position. Because my position is exactly where expertise should be, at the table, with a voice, being heard. 2 years later, I got an email from David Mitchell. Subject line: consulting opportunity. They wanted to bring me in as an external consultant for quarterly system reviews and knowledge transfer sessions. The proposed rate: $245 per hour. I thought about it for exactly 36 minutes. Then I said yes. Not because I needed the money, but because I wanted to see if they'd actually learned anything. They had. The executive team that had dismissed me was gone. The new leadership understood that technical expertise wasn't just another line item in the budget. It was the foundation everything else was built on. Sometimes it's not about revenge. Sometimes it's just about respect. And when your kids call to say they're proud of how you handled everything, when you can sleep at night knowing you stood up for yourself, that's worth more than any consulting fee. The CEO knocking on your door 36 minutes later wasn't victory. It was just confirmation that you were right all along. Your expertise doesn't become more valuable the moment you walk away. It was always that valuable. And the right people knew it. The difference is that some organizations need to lose what they can't afford to lose before they learn to value what they should have treasured.